In this video, I'm going to be teaching you how to start a music publishing company in the United States. Okay, so, number one, I think it would be good if we just kind of set the groundwork of what are we talking about when we say publishing? Okay, so publishing has to do with the song itself, right? And revenues that are going to be coming in from the song. So, if you are a songwriter, you're watching this, it's you sat down at a piano, you have your chords, you have your lyrics and your melodies. So it's the song, the composition, as we call it. And so when we say the publishing revenues, we are talking about the composition. And then on the other hand, you have revenues that are going to come in from the sound recording. So that's the final recorded version of your song, which is also called the master. So when you kind of hear people talking and you go, there's basically two components of any song, two copyrights, two, ways that we're making money. That's what we're talking about. And so, the nice thing with most, record label deals is that the record label owns the master, but the songwriter gets to retain the songwriting portion, which is why we, see things like Taylor Swift is re-recording her albums because via the contract, she still owns the song. So she can make new sound recordings for the exact same songs, but she can't use the original sound recordings, which were signed with the record label. So now that we're talking about publishing, we know we're talking about the composition. And, I'll even give the other example, right? So we recently covered how a company called Hypnosis had purchased Justin Timberlake's music publishing rights, right, to his catalog. And it was estimated it was about $100 million for this acquisition. And we were just kind of noting, obviously, that's an extraordinary amount of money. Justin Timberlake is very young to have such a big kind of buyout happening already, but it's because publishing rights are very valuable, especially when you have obviously a, decent sized artist attached to it. But quite frankly, guys, I do deals all the time for the acquisition of publishing rights and or the masters. And I can tell you that even for more unknown artists, masters and publishing rights are very highly sought, especially by like non-music people, these guys, these investors with big bucks or investment firms. They're seeing that, the value of music is more stable sometimes than even gold, right? It's even more stable than oil in that people love music, right? And so you can always sell music. So that's kind of the idea behind all of this. Record labels, we can make a comparison to a publishing company because I think some artists that might be watching this will say, well, I keep hearing I need to get a publisher and that there's publisher revenues and publisher this and that. And so when we talk about a publishing company, what is it? A publishing company is similar to a record label, but again, it's representing the songwriter's portion of the music. So whereas labels are representing the masters, the final recorded version of the song, the publishing companies and publishers are representing the songwriters on those revenues. And I'll talk to you guys about kind of how that all works. When it comes to how we're going to make sure that you can have a publishing company and get it set up and do it the right way and not to have problems, we're going to talk about where we actually register to get that publishing. Okay, so in the United States, there are two major what are called PROs. So they're performance rights organizations, and they're called BMI and ASCAP. Now, there is another one, CSAC, and there's some others, but honestly, everyone is on either BMI or ASCAP. So as a songwriter, you can register an account with either platform for free. You only need to pick one. I personally have been with BMI for like the last decade. No problems. I even did a whole video like comparing BMI to ASCAP. You can watch that if you want. But in any case, so you register on the platform, and the way that it works is that it will ask, as it relates to the income for publishing, do you have a publisher? And so I think that's where people will say, oh my goodness, it's asking me what my publishing company is. I don't have one. So I need to either go and sign with someone or set one up. And setting one up for yourself is perfectly fine. But let me kind of just, show you, there's two different ways to do this. If you are a solo artist, right, or you're just kind of like on behalf of the band, you can just be that artist and collect the publishing. It's really that simple, right? So these platforms are set up for independent artists who like kind of don't know what they're doing. And they'll just say, well, if you want to collect all the publishing, just say while you're registering the song, what portion of the publishing are you collecting as an individual? And you'll say 100%, right? And then you're done. So you actually don't even need to actually set up an additional company. There are benefits to doing this in some instances, but I just want to at least start with that to say, worry not if you are just, a solo artist and you're just trying to make sure you're collecting all of your revenues, perfect. When you go to register your music, just say, obviously the attributable portion of publishing will go to you. Okay. And then also I'll say on BMI is kind of wonky. It will say as it relates to, the 200% that you're going to be collecting, one half of which is the publisher's share and one half of which is the writer's share. Again, try not to kind of, let it confuse you. You just say, I'm collecting all 200%. 100% for the writer's share, 100% for the publisher's share. I'm everybody. I am my own publisher. So that's the easy way to kind of do it. But when it comes to actually setting up a publishing company, there are reasons that, people do this, right? So number one, it might be you're like that hypnosis company where what you do is you purchase publishing for other songs, in which case become a publishing company. Obviously, you want to have a formal structure, and I'll talk to you about how to do that and the steps here in a second. So that might be number one. Number two, there are tax benefits, right? So when you actually set up a proper company, corporation, an LLC, when you have certain revenues coming in, like in the hundreds of thousands, there are tax benefits to having like a C Corp or an S Corp. But for the majority of you watching, if you're not making hundreds of thousands of dollars from your publishing, then again, it might be a little premature to set up a publishing company. So talk to your accountant specifically about that. But the other vertical that I see a lot with my clients when they want to set up a publishing company is because they're a record label. And as a record label, they'll have a portion of the publishing that they will be collecting for their publishing arm of their company, if that makes sense, right? So it is the record label, but it's the publishing company within the record label. So again, it's because we need to make sure that these kind of different things are delineated clearly. So if you as an independent say, no, I still want to have kind of a separate publishing company for whatever reason, beautiful, you can do that. And there are some additional expenses to going that way, which is why I wanted to kind of lay the groundwork so you guys understand if you do go it as kind of an indie artist, cool, this is how it's going to work. If you go at it as a publisher and you set up a publishing company, cool, I'm going to show you how you do it. Okay. All right. So we talk a lot about when you set up a limited liability company. That's the one I always recommend to everybody. I have more full-length videos on kind of why we do this, the nuances. Feel free to watch those. But, when you set up a limited liability company, you are creating not only a liability shield around you for what you're going to be doing as a publisher, which is incredibly important, but now you have a real entity, right? A real publishing company. And then you take the next step to get EIN, which is an employer identification number. It's like a social security number for the company. And, as far as you might be scratching your head and saying, well, how do I do that? How do I actually set up an LLC? For the majority of states, you're going to go through the Secretary of State. So I would just say Google Secretary of State, if you are in Florida, Secretary of State, start a business. And typically it will just generate the link with like the forms that you need to fill out. And you guys can absolutely do this yourself. I have clients that hire my law office to do this, and we do set up LLCs all over the United States. And I'll tell you the filing fees typically are between like $50, and I've seen up to maybe $150 for some states, but they're typically pretty inexpensive. The one little pro tip that I haven't mentioned that much on these videos, but I'll mention it here. One pro tip is that, sometimes you want to set up or consider setting up your LLC in a state where it's a little bit easier to operate, meaning, in some states like California, you have a required fee to just exist to be filed with the state. I think it's $800. I'll have to double check that. But in any case, that's California. If you set up your LLC in Arizona, there's no fee. You just get to start it, and then it just operates in perpetuity until you decide to terminate the LLC. So there are some benefits to deciding where you're going to set it up, but the easiest rule of thumb, just set it up where you're at and you'll be good to go. Mark on Facebook, I'm with ASCAP, but I've heard that BMI has been paying better for sync songwriting splits, may shift over. I have heard that. Now, there are statutory requirements as far as what has to be paid. And so there should not be variations. Now, there might be kind of small fees, that are playing into that. But very good point. BMI is very easy to work with. Yes, I have not had problems with BMI. And anytime there has been some kind of issue, their customer service has been pretty quick to respond and get it resolved. Okay, so you have set up now your LLC. You go and you get your EIN, and it's like under 10-minute, guys. Easy breezy. You can go to the IRS website, which is irs.gov, and then you'll find, just kind of search on the website, EIN. You go through, you get that number because you need that number to go to the bank and to open up a business bank account in the name of your publishing company. So as far as now, we have an entity that's going to operate as the housing for your publishing entity. And, it doesn't have to be, I get this question a lot. It doesn't have to be only the publishing, right? So some people will set up one LLC to operate as kind of the umbrella for all of their music business ventures. And other people will set up multiple LLCs. One will be just for the publishing company. One will be just for the record label. One will be just for the merchandising, right? You can do it however you want. And there's reasons why, maybe to separate it out, to have the liability not overlapping. But in any case, have at least one, get the EIN, open the business bank account. And then now let's talk about, so you say, right, I'm a publisher. I have my LLC. So now I'm going to go and register with the PROs in the United States, right, which is BMI or ASCAP. And if you do that, there is a fee now, right? So whereas if you were just registering as a songwriter to collect all your publishing, it was free. But if you are a company, right, then there is a fee. So if you're on BMI, the fee, as I saw today, is $150 as an individual. And then it's $250 if you are a partnership, right? So if there's like multiple people in your company. And then on the ASCAP side, it's $50. Okay. And then some clients do need to go and end up like registering on both platforms because they're collecting revenues for artists that are on both platforms. So you'll need to kind of look into that. But that's one of the reasons why I wanted to just show you guys the difference of sometimes it's not necessary to set up a publishing company. You can save some fees by just collecting your revenue. If it's just you, right? You don't need to have that publishing company. But if you are operating, you're collecting publishings on behalf of other people, you're a record label, then it starts to make sense and you want to do that. All right. So then you've gotten the LLC, the EIN. This is not required for obviously setting up a publishing company because at this point you've legally formed. But the last kind of pro tip here is make sure you follow your copyrights. If you're going to be administrating the publishing for your music, for other people's music, you need to make sure that the copyright is registered. And you can do that by just going to copyright.gov. You might be asking, well, what about the poor man's copyright? Can I just mail the copyright to myself and then it's copyrighted? And the answer is no. Under copyright law, there's copyright automatically as soon as you make it right. This goes to a question we had earlier in our live stream having to do with when I hire musicians to, work for hire to make the music. Copyright requires that you do get any kind of assignment in writing because as soon as you make the thing, there's automatic copyright ownership. But the reason you go and you file with the Library of Congress, right? So again, copyright.gov is because you need that piece of paper in order to do things like, initiate lawsuits, right? It's helpful if we're going to do what are called DMCA takedown notices to file, takedowns because someone posts your song on Spotify, which happens more often than you think. So, as a publishing company, that is a very important step that I would encourage you to do just as by way of when we have the music, we're going to release it. You can get a copyright before it's even released. You can get it afterwards. And, of late, when we've been filing these copyright applications, we've gotten a turnaround of like a month or two, which is insanely fast for the Copyright Office. So now is the time to file, people. So those are my best tips on how to start a music publishing company in the United States. And as a final kind of, again, pro tip, something to think about, we talked about registering on BMI or ASCAP within the United States because those are the companies that collect the revenues in the United States. There are other countries and there are other PROs that collect your revenues. And so we will talk about that, in another video, but I will say there's a way to do that. But best of luck with your kind of journey on starting your publishing. And if nothing else, now you know how to collect 100% of your publishing just as a songwriter, even if you decide not to set up a publishing company.